My name's Paul Gilbert. I'm a UX UI developer designer here at 10 Pound Gorilla, and I'm going to be discussing some vector and CSS animations and how you can get vector graphics to do a little bit of movement in your projects. So I don't know how many people know what an SVG is, or if everybody does. There's pretty much two kinds of graphics. There's raster and vector graphics. SVGs are sort of mathematical and somewhat based on XML, and so you can build shapes that scale infinitely because they're based on math. And you have these anchor points, and then you have some handlebars that kind of get the velocity. I kind of think of them when I'm drawing as like almost like little handles for gravity, like a tide pulling the line in a direction. Anyways, SVGs are typically made of two parts. They have a path and a fill shape, and the path is the bounding of the fill, but you can set them separately, and you can control them in the DOM if you put in the SVG code not as the source of an image. So in here I have one of our graphics for the bananas, and you can control this. I have some classes here that I can toggle and modify this separately from the fill. In the fill I can do other stuff as well. You can do other animations too, but I'm just right now just showing the pieces and how they can be controlled. Some of the, and just jumping to CSS animations and how they tie into all this. CSS animations have keyframes, and you can specify the starting point and the end point, or you can specify all the different stops in between if you want to do something drastic at like 50%, and you can have infinite number of percentages there. So the top one would be just taking one thing from being completely transparent to completely opaque, and it moves 20 pixels from the top. It's also like thinking of like a timeline in say Photoshop for generating an animated GIF. You can, have the animation do different things at different points. And then you take these keyframes and then you have to bind them to an element. So you have a handful of properties and values. Written out fully, it would be animation name, duration, timing function, a delay, iteration if you're having a repeat, a direction if you're having it go one way, both ways, reverse if you want to change it up with changing out classes, and a fill mode, so that tells you where it stops. This would be an example of a CSS class that calls the animation banana example. And it's saying that this is the shorthand way of saying it. So you're naming the, or you're calling the animation, the keyframes, which would be banana example. You're saying you want it to last for 3.5 seconds, and it's going to ease in and out of its transitions, and it's going to be delayed for 4 seconds. And when it's done, it's not going to go back to the starting position. It's going to stop at the ending frames. And then down below, I have some of the options for some of the more difficult ones to understand. Like, I think everybody gets a delay and time, but if you wanted to specify reverse animation, you can do that, or different timing functions is really good, especially for some of the drawing stuff that we've been working on. But then I have a few examples that kind of outline some of what I've been doing. So this is a version of offsetting the stroke. So you have an SVG and you have multiple paths inside there, and you have control over each of them. If you want, I could make each of these a different, they are slightly different weights. I could change the colors of them all independently. But when you're doing this, you have this SVG code that you would generate from, I think Figma can do it, but I use Illustrator for it. And so you have certain things that you want to pull over from Illustrator. One of them is being the view box. The view box has 4 parameters. The first and second one are the XY coordinates, and then the last two are the width and the height of what the view box would be. I don't think this is actually the view box for this one because it's not tall enough. I just dropped that in there. But as long as you have that view box, it uses just these units. I don't know. I should have probably looked that up. I'm sorry. But as long as you have those in there and like this can flex, this will scale appropriately inside this box. This is just using Bootstrap and some columns here. Oh, I don't have the button on here. And then below it is kind of an explanation of how those lines are drawn with animations. So each stroke has an array of how long the stroke is essentially. And in order to give it that the look of being drawn in, you then offset it by the length so that it's like negative 100%. And then you can animate it then and say, well, I'm going to take that negative 100% and bring it all the way back to 0. So that way it draws the line. So that's what I do here. The other way you can do animation with SVGs is you can actually use the path. So if you use a path, you can control objects on a path if you want. They'll be bound to it, but it's a little bit more tricky because there's a fixed height and width. So if I go and change this, you're going to see the bananas are going to kind of go yeeting off somewhere else. Oh, wait. Oh, that didn't flex because it's not in the right container. I'm sorry. But it's kind of tricky just using the CSS property of the offset path, because then you have to put in all the values for all the vector points on that path. And then you can let the whatever object you're trying to tie it to will go to that. Is it the big box? Oh yeah, this is it. So essentially this code looks similar to this. It's going to have all these points in here, but you have to duplicate those inside the CSS. And once you start trying to scale it, it's going to start doing some weird stuff. Anyways, that's kind of what I got. Does anybody have any questions or? Sure.
So what happens, is it just in that second last thing that you shared, so is it just something that is not scalable at that point? So like you just know that going into it?
Yeah, you can scale the path will scale, but it doesn't update the object its path. So it'll keep the same overall shape, but it won't be stuck to that same path anymore.
Okay.
I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
No, this isn't scaling right because it's in a weird.
I understand what you're saying. So, how did you get the number on the screen before this one? There's like that 2450 number for your stroke dash array. Where are you getting that?
That is something you can kind of. It doesn't come out of Illustrator. That's kind of you have to kind of decide what length it is. Like I can go in here. If I wanted to and say, let's not do it this way. Let's do it a little bit different. Here. Okay, so if I go and say I pick maybe her outline, this is the outline. So it's going to have a dash array of 4600. If I change this to 1600, you're going to see that it's not fully drawn. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to kind of mess around just knowing the length. I think if this was 36.
Do you know the length at all, or you just kind of have to figure it out?
You have to just figure it out. So each of these paths you have to kind of guess at. I mean,
so is generally like relative, like one line is relative to the other line, and that is determines the length. The length. Do you know how it's determined?
I don't know how they're determined, but they are relative to each other. So like it's say this line around her face is a little thin, short line. It's not 4600. It's probably maybe 300.
Okay.
you just play around with those, and you kind of have to be a little bit close to them because otherwise it affects the animation. So if you say that you want it to take 4 seconds, but you have the wrong length in there by say too far, it's going to be traveling from further back than it needs to get the drawing done.
So how are those numbers like pixels, or what are they representative of? Like,
you know, somebody tried explaining it at one point. I don't exactly know.
Which probably has like something to do with like cosine and
Yeah,
math behind it.
so do you have any tips on like where to start with the line, like from a number perspective, to test it out? And then is there anything that's, like you say, if it's 4 seconds and it's shorter than that, it's not gonna.
I usually when I do it, I can kind of get a feel for it already just based on the size of the graphic. It's one of those things where I'll start taking bigger chunks out of it. Maybe I'll go -1,000 or 100, but looking it up, it just says that the offset property can accept a percentage or a numeric value, but the percentage is relative to the percent of the current viewport. So it's viewport based. Okay.
And is the viewport the containing box view?
No, the viewport is the browser window.
Oh.
I don't think it's tied to the view box. The view box does act as kind of a porthole, kind of. So if you wanted to, you could make a set of like sprites or something, or graphics that you wanted to like swap in and out. You could have a single SVG document and just change the XY coordinates depending on the class it is to move it to a different symbol. So if we had our own set of icons that we wanted to use somehow through just a single vector file, we could do it that way.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I
Never knew anything about any of this.
So it's powerful when you get like what I'm doing here with these strokes. I think it's nice that you know, in the right context and use, you could do something really neat with it, other than just changing the outline of a banana. But
yeah. What is the are any of these like a browser, like is mobile? How does any of the devices have issues with it?
I did put in here somewhere that there are prefixes for certain other browsers, WebKit keyframes and stuff like that, but it does work on it. I've been doing this for probably about 8 years, and I've never had an issue on any device. Seems like it works pretty well, but I mean, again, using the other prefixes.
Yeah.
Just for space, I didn't want to be adding duplicates of everything.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And then I'm just firing these based on the div in the viewport. So I'm using JavaScript to fire off some stuff. Just adds a class to the surrounding div, and then that triggers the animations. Because otherwise you would be doing, you could do an animation delay, but you might not be on that section. So that way it's starting it from 0 when you're looking at it.
And that's how you're kicking it back off when you come back to it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm letting it like pop on and off as I go around.
I am pretty terrible at CSS like animations and transitions and stuff. So this is like over my head for sure on a lot of it. But it's really cool to see how it's put together and how like these like animations, while they are complex to put in, they add like a little bit of flair to a site and just make it look that much more polished and all that pizzazz.
Yeah, I think used in the right way and subtly, and you can use them for. I know Laura and I were talking about micro interactions. You can use a lot of these CSS animations for little button hovers or clicks and give it a little bit of something, some user feedback.
Mm-hmm. Side note: the site you build for it looks really freaking cool, and just like the way like it's perfectly illustrating what you're going over. So it's just
Yeah, I was trying.
cool.
I just didn't think that it wouldn't come across the same if it was a PowerPoint or a Google slide. So I just tried to make this over the past several weeks.
Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our Gorilla Learning Lab. We have a lot more banana tidbits for you to get ape over. Check out our other videos or visit our website at www.10poundgorilla.com. I'm swinging on out of here.
Ooh, ooh, ah, ah. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You're not subscribed.